Okay, so this is a video of me pacing up and down my living room with the aircon on because I'm in Greece and it's very warm at the moment. It's the only way I can concentrate, so I have the aircon on, and so I've called these the AC tapes. I think this might be AC tape 3 or 4. It's amazing how hard it is to keep track of these things. But basically the idea is that I'm going to talk about things that I might talk about if I was going to do the show. And just to kind of like review all of the topics and then see really which topic I might actually want to use as something I'm going to talk about in the show, which starts on the 12th of August, which is only about 14 days away. So I just picked one out. Trust me, it wasn't rigged, which ironically was about bets. So this is the idea. I've got a chapter in my book where I talk about projects being bets. And the interesting thing about projects being bets, you can't really argue with this. You can't really argue with the idea that projects are bets because there's a non-zero chance of them failing. So somebody is putting some money on the idea of this project paying off. And there's at least a small chance that it will fail, that it won't pay off. So it is some kind of bet. But the interesting thing about projects being bets is that the fact that this bet is being made kicks off a whole bunch of different games that people seem to play. And the first of these is something called heads I win, tails you lose. So if you think about it, if you're the person who's taken the risk or persuaded the organization to take the risk of doing a project, then you want to be as far away as possible from this project if it fails, and there's a non-zero chance of it failing. And you want to be as near as possible to this project if it succeeds. So always with any project, there are a bunch of people who are involved in the project who are kind of playing this weird kind of game of touch with it, a bit like a kind of ascending balloon. Like if the balloon like ascends and is really successful, then they want to be attached to it. This metaphor's not really going where I thought it would go. But anyway, so too many metaphors, man. But there is this idea of heads I win, tails you lose. And this is connected to another kind of game that gets played when people talk about bets, which is something called the hiding hand. And I got the idea of the hiding hand from a chap called Albert Hirschman, who was German by birth, born at kind of possibly the most interesting time possible to be a German, certainly a German Jewish person. He was born in the 1920s in Berlin, escaped Berlin just at the right time, fought in the French army and fought in the American army. It was impressed by the American army relative to the French one because they had uniforms and guns. And one of the things that Albert Hirschman came up with is this idea of the hiding hand. Now, Albert Hirschman was an economist. He ended up working for the Federal Reserve in the US, but before that he worked for the World Bank. And he was involved in funding lots of projects around the world. And what he was talking about was this idea of everybody kind of conspiring at the beginning of a project to cover up the fact that it's risky. So to cover up that it's a bet. And everybody being involved in this for like the very straightforward reasons. So for relatively straightforward reasons. So the people who made the bet, the people who are playing the heads I win, tails you lose, they don't want anybody to really admit that it's a bet. They don't really want to find out any difficulties with it early on because they want this to have the best chance possible as running as a bet. And the people who are working on the project, they don't want to highlight any problems with the project early on either because they want to get paid. So everybody, probably not explicitly, everybody implicitly agrees to kind of pretend that this project's going to be fine. And that's kind of okay for a while. But one of the problems with this is that it does cover up what are possibly fundamental problems with the project that would have been better to be fixed early on. And kind of the mirror side of this this kind of hiding hand is mirror side of the hiding hand is what I call project management theatre. And I suppose project management theatre, because I'm a project manager, is something that I'm kind of heavily involved in. And this is the idea that kind of like if only you use the right methodology, if only you can use the right methodology, then the project will be guaranteed to be a success. That you do all of these kind of ceremonies, as we call them in Agile, if you do stand-up meetings right, if you do the show and tells right, all of this kind of stuff, then you'll be guaranteed for your project to be a success. But of course, this isn't the case. This isn't the case that your project can be a success, or it's guaranteed to be a success. Now, one of the interesting things about a difference between kind of typical gambling on like horses and gambling on projects, and this is a really crucial difference to understand, is that when you're gambling on projects, you can do some things that you're not really allowed to do when you're gambling on horses. And that is, you can cheat. What do I mean by cheat? I mean that you can actually start to understand what the odds of this project are. And then by understanding what the odds of this project are, you can seek to improve those odds. So, if one of the things that you're hiding when you're playing the hiding hand game is that the technology that you're using doesn't really work, you can actually cheat and you can improve that technology. You can change that technology and improve it so that you give a chance, you improve the odds of your project. You can actually make the odds of your project better. The other thing that you can do, and this is a really tricky thing, but it's actually what needs to be done very often, is that you can see when a project actually hasn't had a big enough bet on it. So very often what happens with projects is that some money is spent on it, some money is spent on this bet. But in order to really make this thing pay off, you need to invest more money in it. The only way that it's really going to work is if you kind of up the bet. And so this again is a way that in project management, you can improve your chances of a project succeeding, which is a bit different from betting on a horse. So it's a crucial thing. It's an important thing to understand that kind of like, yes, projects are bets, but there are these two ways that you can improve the odds of a project that you can't really improve the odds of betting on a horse. But then there's a final thing. You remember, like when I started talking, I said that projects are bets because there's a non-zero chance of them failing, of them succeeding. But some projects are set up in such a way that no matter what happens, they're going to fail. And in the book, I call this a nonsense accumulator. So basically, an accumulator is a bet that you make not on one horse, but several horses, and the odds of the money that you win from one horse is kind of added to the next horse, and then if that wins, and then the money from that horse is added to the next horse if that wins, and on and on and on. So if you basically bet on 3 horses that are 10 to 1 and they all win, the odds will be 1,000 to 1 and you win that back. Now, the interesting thing about lots of projects that you work on is that they are essentially nonsense accumulators, that there are so many aspects of them that are high odds, that are unlikely to pay off, that when you add all of those odds together, the chances of the project really succeeding are very, very low. And so the third way that you can be really effective in dealing with projects, if you understand that they're bets, is by spotting the ones that are nonsense accumulators. And if you're the boss of such a project, stopping the project, you might be able to actually remove some of the things that are making them a nonsense accumulator. But if there are too many of them, then you don't really have a chance of doing that. And the other thing, if you're a project manager, what you can do is run away.